Ladies and gentlemen, right before we go for lunch, let's dive into our next panel discussion for the day. Our next session is poised to be a pivotal discussion on creating networks for 5G and beyond. This session aims to chart the course for the future of connectivity, delving into the challenges and opportunities to establishing robust networks to support emerging technologies. We are covering everything, basically. Guiding this discussion, we have an eminent panel. Serving as our moderator, ladies and gentlemen, we have been joined by Amitabh Singhal, Director, Telxess Consulting Services and founder, former CEO, Nixie, ISpA Association. Amitabh is a seasoned professional with an impressive 39-year career spanning both the for-profit corporate sector and non-profit arena, both domestically and internationally. His remarkable contribution in the field of internet governance and policy have left an indelible mark. So please join us welcoming Amitabh sir on the stage. Right there. So a very warm welcome. Please join us on the stage. Now talking about our panelists. From Google, we have been joined by Mr. Kapil Malhotra, the head of customer engineering, who brings with him a wealth of expertise in network infrastructure. Kapil sir, a very warm welcome. Please join us. From Vodafone India, we have Mr. P. Balaji, the Chief Regulatory and Corporate Affairs Officer, known for his profound insights into the telecommunication landscape. Please put your hands together for Mr. P. Balaji, everyone. Representing DIPA, we welcome Mr. Tilak Raj Dua, the Director General, who brings a wealth of experience in policy and regulation. With over 35 years of experience, his expertise spans various aspects of telecom industry, including product and business development, licensing, regulatory affairs, spectrum management, and many more. And finally, we are honored to have Lieutenant General A.K. Bhatt, the Director General of Indian Space Association, who brings a unique perspective on network development. Together, they will share their invaluable insights on infrastructure, sustainability, and collaborative strategy to pave the way for seamless transition into the 5G era and beyond. Over to you, Amitabh, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good day to you all. Pleasure to be here after a while, and I can see so many familiar faces, yes. Balaji and Dua Sahab, and of course, the pleasure of meeting General Bhatt now and Kapil. I guess there's a lot on our plate, and we have limited time. So I guess we will try not to cover too much, but at the same time get a flavor, a high-level flavor of the issues that we need to kind of look at when it comes to 5G and beyond, right? So I think we are still getting started with 5G. So beyond is still futuristic. But I guess some of us who have been around since the early 90s here in this industry, we have been looking beyond every year. Okay, so every time we have something coming up, we look beyond, right? And that is a cycle that continues on. So it's been a virtuous cycle till now. So I guess it's interesting that way, and challenging times always. So the challenge never ends, right? Okay. Let me just kind of try and establish the background as to how, and I'm not a great expert at 5G, okay? My area has been internet and policy regulations thereof. So it'll be an opportunity for me to learn as well. But then these are practitioners here who are seasoned on this particular matter, and I'll try and mold our questions and get illicit answers to give us as to what 5G will look like as it comes up when we are transitioning to it, where we are at, and where we can be in the future, a near foreseeable future, right? And the challenges and opportunities that we'll have to kind of look at. So while opportunities, yes, it is understood that there are opportunities galore when we are talking about new technologies coming in, but there are associated challenges that come in. So with the good comes the not so good, right? So with 5G, I think the good that has happened is that we just launched even not less than a year back, October, I think 2022. And we have two players at this point of time, and I think they're the fastest rising cellular technology operators today. If you look at globally, there are 230 5G networks already, and I think the rollout has been much more faster for 5G cellular technology than ever before, and any technology has done. So that's a good point, and that is where I think the enthusiasm is. I think this Airtel is the second largest 5G network in the world now. Something like that. That is what I read somewhere. Or at least put together, Reliance and Jio and Airtel would be among the largest networks. And I'm sure that they will become, if not today, but then very soon. Because the way they are progressing is humongous. You know, we have all seen times in the 90s and the early 2000s where networks were slow to roll out. Okay, rollout issues were predominant. But today, when we are looking at, let's say in January, there was something like 32,000 5G BTSs. Now we are looking at 350,000 BTSs already on the ground and rolling out faster. So the rollout of networks, which used to be a big issue, is much more speedier now than ever before. So that's the kind of enthusiasm that we are looking into. So that's the good part. I think 52% of the devices are 5G. The customer devices are now 5G enabled, which are rolling out in the market. So that's the uptake that we are looking at. But then that's the good part. And we are also looking at the fact that maybe by 2024 end, we will have countrywide coverage of 5G overtaking 4G. So that's the kind of vision that people are looking at, from what I gather. So that's pretty quick in terms of rolling out this particular generation of technology for mobile connectivity. Now with the good, like I said, comes the not so good. So there'll be challenges. Now challenges I could think of is basically maybe 4 or 5 of these big challenges. One is investments, of course. Now investments, basically, again, when you're talking about rollout at such a faster clip, investments would be the first major task or a challenge. The second would be how quicker can you keep deploying these networks, right? So there are challenges on the way there. For all our lives in telecom, I think ROW has been always a challenge in terms of rollouts, okay? We have always struggled with that issue. How far have we come there in that? We'll have to understand. Then there would be use cases when it comes to 5G and beyond. Now, whether they'll become commercially viable at any point of time in the future, now, in near future, or further off. So these are all interrelated issues and I think there's another big issue in infrastructure side, which I read about, was fiberization of the telecom towers. Okay, especially in the context of 5G and beyond, that's a very critical part of the infrastructure challenge that we'll have, and the industry has to face up to it. And how will they do that? So these are some of these issues that I thought we will try to touch upon. Maybe there are more, which I think our eminent speakers here and the practitioners will probably come out with. So I think I will try and change the role, the discussion a bit, in the sense Balaji, I think, has to leave early. So what I'll do is, having laid this background, let me ask Balaji to give his perspective on the kind of policy and regulatory challenges that you see. I mean, I've noted some of these challenges that we have to face up to, right, as an industry, when it comes to 5G and beyond. Now, are these the only challenges? How do you think, from your veteran perspective of handling policy and regulatory issues for the telecom industry, how do we go from here, and what do we need to face up to?
Thank you so much, Amitabh. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you. It's been a while, but yeah, I'm delighted to be here with such eminent panelists. I think at the start, there are 3 or 4 things that I'd like to mention. You rightly said the industry evolves, and technology is a way to kind of do the transition. But the important thing is, if you look at 5G the world over, networks have been set up in many parts of the world, and 5 years, 6 years out, people are still struggling with revenues. And in these times, more than ever before, the need for having return on investment is extremely important, and that's a consideration that's coming up almost everywhere. Okay, that's point number 1. Second is, it's all fine to say huge consumption. Point is, where is the consumption going into? In the end, there are a few streaming platforms. In the end, there are certain, should I say, 80% of the traffic goes into certain platforms more than a lot of others. And, I'm just kind of staying away from that. That is not the topic for today's discussion, but that's something out there where everybody is looking at what needs to be done. Because in the end, it's not an endless pot of gold to keep pouring into connectivity. A lot of companies world over, and even in India, the pace has slowed down. While you say, accelerating. Frankly, there are a lot of people who are saying, you know what, let's put a pause button and figure out where the return is coming. Because all this means is you're taking more debt, and debt is not good for rollout unless you see a fair return. And today, if you look at devices, frankly, people are struggling to figure out what they can do with a 5G device. In the end, for consumers I'm talking about, right? And that's not just in India, but the world over, because in the end, you can stream YouTube, or you can stream any of these other things with the technology that they have brought in, Google and the Prime and Amazon and other people are doing, which is that you get very good streaming speeds on a 4G device, because there's caching that they work with operators. There's more, should I say, they're able to kind of crunch and compress information and data faster to kind of provide that experience. And therefore, the use case is the real issue here. And then on top of that, if you end up with, on the promise of the future, sure, private networks have the promise, but it's going to take a while before you kind of get to that stage. And therefore, at this moment of time, in that context, extremely important that what the government has done, which is absolutely right, setting up the right vision for $1 trillion digital economy. So we'll get there, right? The faster you get there is when you have all the ecosystem players aligned to it. And Mr. Dua is absolutely the right person to talk about it, but frankly, the central government policies are fabulous to make sure that the state authorities and the local administrations support that and are taken along this journey is very critical. That's how you get to low cost of towers, faster approvals, deemed approvals, and so on. Because if you address that, then one of the problems, which is on the viability, the business case becomes that much better. The second thing that I would say is on the whole ease of maintenance, ease of doing business, and the amount of time that oftentimes gets spent on right-of-way issues, on sometimes fiber gets cut because of one reason or the other, itself causes disruption which can be avoided, because the cost of rework is that much more. And the government has done, again, centrally a fabulous job in terms of the Gati Shakti program and the portal and so on. But making sure that that becomes part of every state and local administration's DNA is going to take effort. So I think the vision is great, the tools are fabulous, the central government is absolutely doing the right things. It's about just making sure that it actually percolates to the last mile. That, to my mind, will make the biggest difference. And as I said, the lower the cost, the easier that you are able to do this business, the better it is, because frankly, if you've got 750,000 towers that have 4G today, over time, as you start to look at low latency applications and you start to look at the high bandwidth applications on 5G, whether it's on education, health, and everything else, all the use cases that every one of us knows about, the number of sites that you need is going to be maybe double of that. You need to have another 1 million sites over a period of time, not today, but over time. And that's only going to happen if you can reduce the cost and if you're able to ease the rollout. If that doesn't happen, then it'll take longer. I'm not saying the vision won't be accomplished. The vision and mission will be accomplished. It'll just take longer and it'll be more painful, and therefore the business plan gets progressively worse. So those are broad challenges that, to my mind, the government is aware of. They're doing everything which is possible. You just need to make sure that it gets done sooner than later.
So Balaji, thank you for that touch of reality. So my very, very positive looking outlook is something that you've challenged and said, okay, hang on, there's still a lot of roadblocks to cross. It's not as good as it looks, but then we'll get there, right? And I think the right mix of policy interventions from the government, but I think for so many years we have seen, the policies are written very well, but then implementation on the ground becomes a problem. For example, Gati Shakti now, great idea of speeding up the approval processes on the ground, but then reality is different, right? So I think that's also related to the reduction of cost. So the faster you get your approvals, the quicker you roll out, it's probably more cost effective. And if it becomes cost effective, then the business becomes more sustainable in the long run. So that's a good point, yeah. Thank you so much. So, okay. When it comes to the, keeping up with the positive stream of mind that I've come with, when we look at the utilization of these networks, okay, the growing networks that will have, investments will pour into it. Idea is that when you pour investments into these new networks, involving networks, they need to be utilized. And for that, of course, what comes to my mind is something what we have been talking about for years is about network effect. Okay, the more users, the more buyers and sellers you have on a platform, the higher the value that the platform gets, and the networks become more valuable then, right? So who better than Google to give us a little perspective about how they see 5G and beyond technologies kind of impacting our future in terms of driving that network effect, which benefits not just the masses but also the industry, and also helps with their economies of scale. Right. So, any perspective on that, and the challenges that you see you would have to face, and how are you trying to overcome those?
Thanks, Amitabh. I'll start with Google's mission, and I think most of you would have known, it's like to organize world's information and make it accessible to all. Now, this is our mission, and our mission is to make this happen on a single click. Now, to make it happen on the single click, our association and our tie-up with telco is very important. And this is what our focus has been. Now, if you look at from a Google Fiber Undersea, we bring that up to the shores of India. If we look at within our tie-ups with the telco, as Balaji just talked about the YouTube caching servers, which we have to make sure as being the largest carrier of the traffic today, we put a less strain on the telcos to taking it to the back by putting our caching there. Now, what we are doing and starting last year in India and globally, and particularly in India, we have opened this for other OTT and other content creators, not just from the media gaming, but also from the manufacturing, mobile makers, devices, where you have APKs and software updates which has to go. So we are doing over this thing. Another thing is, particularly if we still see 1 billion subscriptions there, 200 million are still 2G feature phones in the country. So the need to make them a 5G ready, there is an entry barrier. When an 800 rupee phone helps someone in a tier 5 city who just mean to make a voice call, the entry barrier is huge because this phone could be 10K. And this is where our technology of Android, where we are partnering to see, can for this country, we can come up with a low cost. Obviously, this requires an ecosystem. That's on the one side. Second thing, what we also realize as an organization, the load which 5G will give, while we still wait for our killer app, and Saurabh talk about it, we still don't have that killer app, but ecosystem will evolve. We will see those interfaces which actually are able to exploit that. As that happens on the consumer side, what will happen, the backhaul, which is a problem today. 5G frequency, we, on a simple journey, let me call it radio, promises 1 Gbps or whatever, but the moment it comes to backhaul, and this is where the fiberization as well as the microwave frequencies comes in, right? The cell side to the core. And this is where the edge technologies, what we have seen till now, the network functions have been the private network functions. They were vertical stack, and you talk about, Balaji, that the cost has to come down. So the cost coming down, one initiative which industry took, which is still getting rolled out and eventually getting into more dense packing, is virtualization of the network functions, so that you can reduce the cost, make it more open. But now the need is to have more cloud native, in which that agility of further managing it, having the proprietary interfaces, proprietary configurations, which eventually increase the managed cost and all those things can come in. And finally, on the core also, the same will happen. Now, coming to the future, now this is more from a B2C side we talk about, also the industry use cases which will come up. And I think both Salil and Saurabh talked about it. It's the first time the use cases are there. Now the technology is coming to enable that, whether it is IoT, in case of utility, it could be head-end system. In case of AAA gaming consoles, right, you need to have the processing capability earlier. So the investment going into the 5G core or onto the radio side, it's not just the compute on the edge for network. It's also the spare compute on the edge for processing the industry use cases near to the user. And if the thing goes in that direction, surely the better ROI can come. And yes, a lot of problems has to be solved. Tower sharings, we have seen passive. Can we go into active? So entire ecosystem has to work together. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, so I think I'll catch you on that a couple of things. One is I'll come back to you later on the infrastructure and Google is helping develop. Apart from this being a content platform, so to say, it's much more than what Google is known for, right? And they're working on it. I'll come back with another question on that. But at the same time, I think I'll also take up on the fact that stakeholders need to work together is what both of you have mentioned, which is very, very critical for the future of the industry to come together. And that is where the role of the associations, the industry associations is very, very critical. Okay, they are the ones who have all the stakeholders on the table. Okay, they have a complicated role. It's not easy. I've run associations, so I know. Getting all the players who come together, talk in the same common voice sometimes. Okay, there are divergent views on a lot of things, but then you have to get them on the same platform, get a common consensus, and get them ready to work on a common cause, right, to further their own future. So that's the role that Dua Saab and General Bhatt Saab are playing. So I'll first start with Mr. Dua as to what is DIPA doing to bring all these stakeholders together, make them work together, understand where they have to join forces, and what are the challenges from the regulatory and policy perspective, and that is the role of the associations, right? Address those policy and regulatory challenges which affect the common cause of every stakeholder, okay? And ultimately benefits the consumer in the end, because once a policy is laid out, regulations come in, it has to have that ultimate benefit that goes to the consumer, not just the industry, right? So DIPA's strategic role in all this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amitabh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to be with you. Let me put Amitabh in a different way. Rather than addressing challenges, I would say, how do we manage ease of doing business? That's a thing that we want to know. Well, let me just tell you there are three things which I just want to like change. Change 1, change 2, and change 3. Change 1 is the one who follows the change, which is a laggard. Change 2 is the one who goes with the change, is a survivor. And the change 3 is who causes the change. That is where India is today. He is a leader. I think 5G is a great success story for India. If you look at in October, the Honorable Prime Minister launched. Today, we have close to, I think, 700 districts done, close to 300 days of this, and over 3.50,000 BTS is involved into. It's a huge, huge success story. Now, we as DIPA represent, biggies like Indus, Summit Digital, Ascent, Tower Vision, American Towers, and Suyog, Vicon, Aerial Telecom, and many others. I think this is what the role that we play is. The infrastructure is equally and important. Infrastructure, and it's a critical component, is an equally important and a parallel activity, is not a serial activity. So this what we did was that today we have close to 7,50,000 towers and almost close to 2.7 billion BTSs over this. So let me just say, okay, what else? I think how the government, the regulator, the operators, and the infrastructure provider played this role. I think the policies. Let me talk about the policy. The first policy which came in was around November 2016, which was just a start of the policy. We didn't have any policy, having been with this institution for over 11 years, and then also before that with COI and other things, we didn't have any policy. I think DOT played a very great role into this. First policy came 16. As we continued to move on, this needed a lot of amendments. Then came August 21, then 22, and then later on again 23. All that what it just says was that how do we manage that, create an infrastructure which is important for the 5G success story. Now first policy came, it was simplified, right of way to be given, the states should follow the center, which was not happening. And which then came again further amendment in 21, then 22 and 23, which all eased out now that you need a small cell, right? Small cell needs to be done because of the back offloading as well as the improved coverage. Then came the amendment was that we need to put fiber. Fiber is very important for 5G. Now either you put it under the ground or you put overground. The underground putting was an extremely difficult task because from the point of view charges, both putting up as well as the restoration charges. Then came the policy was putting up the aerial fiber, which made the things very easy. But not that, still today we have almost close to 35% only the towers which are fiberized. As far as the backhaul is concerned, we are still quite far. If I compare with China, we are just 10% of what the per capita laid out the fiber is there. So therefore, if I look at the national broadband mission which came was, again, at the end of 2024, I need another 1 million towers which are there, which is in terms of the small cells, in terms of the poles, in terms of the next came the EB, grid supply. Now, because of the densification of the network which is required, we got into the DISCOM on board on this. To give you one example, in Kerala, we did the proof of concept with the Kerala government. They have almost close to 90,000 poles which are there. The government proactively played a role and put up the charges for these poles per pole. Any charges keep varying. Now the policies come from 100 rupees to 300 rupees, depending on where are you putting it up, whether you're putting in rural or you're putting it in. So this is one more thing which has happened on this. Then second was the aggregate billing. What happens if you have number of towers, the bill used to come for different. Now that the policy has come, aggregation of the billing done. Then the open access if you are using the green energy. And then came still one of the issue which we need is availability of the grid supply, which is very important. It should be on priority, and also the tariffs which need to be put into the industrial tariff and corporate. These are some of the things we have been continuously working with the government, and I'd like to thank state government, central government, regulator, who have been proactively putting up things in place. That is where we are in Fajr. The next was one of the success stories from the infrastructure provider is the sharing study. I think this is one country in back in 2010 evolved the sharing policy. We used to, we keep going for the tower exchange. The tower exchange is like in GSMA. Till about 5 years, none of these guys were aware what is a share concept. So that's another sharing study which, again, rest we'll talk about it
Yeah,
later.
I know that, takes me back to history where I was working for a company where we were one of the pioneers of tower sharing, right? And in DOT, I helped write a policy paper on tower sharing once upon, and that was early 2003 or something, 2004, something like that. Anyway, that's history. But then thank you for telling us as to how the industry association like yours, the digital infrastructure providers, is playing a role in helping every step of the way for the operators and the tower players to overcome policy hurdles, building up on those policies so that they can have faster rollouts, quicker rollouts. But still, I think it's a challenge which will keep on getting addressed by you. I'll basically also like to touch upon later on very quickly is about the fiberization. Now for 5G and beyond when we're talking about, fiberization is very, very key. Okay, and I think the statistics today are not very good. 35% of towers are fiberized, right? And I think if you're looking at 5G and beyond, you're looking at low latency, very high bandwidth. Okay, network utilization has to be very, very high. Now that is not possible without fiberization, right? And that's something that I think the focus has to be on very clearly from the association side so that all the players can work towards it. Whatever is stopping it, whatever is creating hurdles, that needs to be overcome. So we'll come back to that particular question in a little bit. General Bhatt sir, sorry to keep you waiting for so long. But from a satellite, so he runs the satellite Satcom association, right? Now, to my mind, we're looking at, we come from a different background where satellite was a separate service, the telecom was a separate service, internet was a separate service. We had these divisions once upon a time and we fought with each other all the time. I remember way back in 1998-99 when we were actually developing the NTP-99. And as ISP association, we were the ones who were the first private operators to be allowed to connect to foreign satellites, before which it was all Department of Space and canalized through them, right? And there were issues around it. Now we have come a long way from then. Now, as I see it, when we move towards these new generations of cellular technologies where everything is converged, now there's no distinction between data, voice, whatever, multimedia stuff. We all know where we are at. I still think that this is my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe some others, is there is still a lack of convergence, true convergence between, or seamless connectivity between satellite bandwidth, satellite networks, and also the terrestrial networks. There's still some regulatory gaps, or there are policy gaps, there are operational gaps. I think it's something that there's still a little friction about. So before, I would like you to get into a little more detail about what are those frictions, why is it not a seamless connectivity yet? Because we have to make 5G connectivity much more successful, as Balaji alluded to, because it still has to go a long way before it becomes successful. I think it'll be important for all these technologies like satellite and terrestrial networks to come together seamlessly. So what's stopping that? What are the hurdles? And you can talk about 28 gig and controversies if you want. I think people would love to hear you.
Gentleman representing the Indian space industry. Firstly, I thank the organizers here to allow the new boy from space to be in here. Because most of the time, and it is a legacy issue, like he very rightly said, satellite communication was one distant thing which maybe was there for strategic use or used in some far-flung areas, but that was not the primary area. And I, as a defense user, as a young officer, one of the welfares the Indian government used to do is a small satellite box, which was pretty large and heavy, would come to a furthest post somewhere in Saichen or Leh, from where you could make a call which was subsidized, and maybe with all the latency, say hello to your family once in 15 days. From then to today, where we are looking at seamless communication reaching every Indian. And what is most important is 5G. 5G would be perfectly placed in this country when it ensures that it doesn't also lead to a digital divide. As far as urban areas go, 5G will roll out. The costs, the distances, the use cases will always help it. But what about a large part of India? Seeing it from up north in Leh Ladakh to maybe areas of less population in Rajasthan, which are slowly getting populated, or be it in central India where populations are low, or northeast, and all over. If we have to ensure that the digital divide does not take place, we have to get the new co-traveler, which is satellite communication. Now, what has happened in the world over is SATCOM came much earlier, and in fact, space and usage of space for other than strategic use, the first use was communication. And geo satellites did bring a revolution because they could connect any part of the world. But despite that, they did not become business cases and big companies failed. But a disruption in very recent times has been brought by Starlink, by this low Earth orbit satellites, which has just changed the whole story of the world. They are looking at providing speeds, capacities, which can be useful in the current day of usage of digital communication. And when we are in this world where today, like one of the things is infrastructure, the cost of infrastructure, the cost of fiber, can satellite communication provide an alternative, a long-term cost-effective alternative? Because it is not just rolling out the fiber. It's just not putting on a tower into a far-flung area. Equally important is maintaining it. Would it be easier by towers in space, by satellites? As satellites are becoming cheaper with technology coming in. Is fiber from space an alternative to be a co-traveler with the terrestrial communication? That is what we are looking at. As on today, there is a wide difference between what satellite communication would cost and what terrestrial would cost. But we are looking at 10 years beyond. We are looking at 20 years beyond. We are looking at backhaul. We have to now plan an integration where fiber, the towers and the space towers operate together in sync.
So I think that's the important point where instead of using the word alternative for satellite and terrestrial, it would be complementing each other. How do you work on complementing each other rather than being alternatives? Because that's where you get into a tricky slope. Okay, great. So back to Google when we are talking about beyond. Okay, use cases maybe or something like that. So Google and other companies like Apple and Metas of the world, they are the ones who are creating the futuristic vision, world for us, right? In terms of how we are connected, how we use it. So from you, what I would like to hear about is, you're not just a content company anymore, you're also into infrastructure, big time, right? So when I look at telecommunication and we talk about various divisions over the years and how we are all coming together, I still think that today companies like Google will probably aid something like telecom in the cloud. Okay, so maybe there will be coming together of all the distinctions between the telecom spaces that we have had. That is one. Then we are also looking at use cases of in the medical healthcare facilities, for example, telesurgeries, which will require the kind of bandwidth and the low latency outputs that we have with 5G and maybe 6G and later on. Again, another topic to look at. So which is where self-driving cars, so that's the future that Google is building for us. So from the infrastructure point of view, can you give us a little flavor, not very much because I think the time is short, we are already going to overrun it, but give us a flavor there.
Very how,
Which justifies
absolutely.
5G and 6G and later on.
So
right?
we have been building infrastructure in the cloud. Now it's what 5G is enabling, building the infrastructure distributed. It's not like one or two. It's all about the point of presence along with your core, along with your sites, right? Bringing the compute capability near to the users. That will enable the use cases, because if we look at the core. And the second thing is the overall manageability of this infrastructure, packaging, delivering, right? Giving a API framework for the community to come and start interacting with it. This is where Google is working on. One last thing which I want to touch upon is the energy. Now, when we talk about these 750K towers as well as all the edge locations, energy is the key. You have to power it on, you have to cool it down. So whatever we are doing as Google onto the area of high optimized energy usage for the infrastructure, that can we run the same kind of compute and infrastructure with 20 or 30% less energy using our technologies. We are contributing on open source, helping the enterprise as well as telco to imbibe it and make sure that the energy usage is also less. So just to share, it's not about building large data centers anymore. This is enabling a compute capability, a low latency near to the user. And this is the kind of technology, all hyperscalers, it's not just, I would say Google, and this also requires working closely with the network function providers, right? Whether it's Ericsson, Nokia, Alcatel-Lucent, Mavenir, right? All those things, and the organizations like Red Hat, HP, Google, Amazon, this all ecosystem coming together, providing this, looking for use cases, packaging it, productizing it, and rolling it out.
Great. Thank you so much. So very quickly, I think just maybe a couple of minutes each on 5G is happening, is going to happen. What about beyond that? So there was this question from Voice and Data about giving a little thought to terahertz networks. So are we prepared to go further on that? What's up to begin with? Then maybe it's some thoughts. I mean, we don't have to get into more details about it, but think beyond, because we have a 6G vision document already from the Prime Minister, right? So are we going to start working as an industry towards that as well? Or we are going to be stuck with 5G only for the time being?
Very rightly, for terahertz communications, from the space point of view, how will it give? It will definitely require transformation in many technologies, even in the satellite domain. And inter-satellite links, which presently are not so critical, will become very, very important if this kind of capacities has to be done. And even now, it is not for communication also, apart from the spectrum which we are fighting for between terrestrial and space, we may have to even look at light, lasers, to be providing high capacities for communication through satellites. These things will happen. They today look something which is in the future, maybe something closer to a dream. But these are realities with the kind of capacities we require in digital communication for the future.
And also possibly from the human aspect of it, when we are talking about radiation effects of spectrum and all, when you go into terahertz, I think they are considered to be more safer and non-harmful to the humans. So medical use cases and security use cases is where I think the future is for that. Right.
But yes, there is a little time before it actually starts rolling out.
Great.
Because presently we are centered on 5G.
I think the cue is there to kind of stop here. This is a vast subject, so we can go on and on. So thank you very much for a big perspective from infrastructure point of view, from futuristic point of view, and thank you for listening to us.